around reimagine time and how we use that strategy. And so again, just fleshing that out on this slide, you see those 5 strategies, and in the white boxes, the specific actions and bodies of work that we're lifting up to meet those strategies. And here you see how summer learning is a part of that reimagine time structure. Underneath all of this work, and you'll hear a little bit about this today, it's important that we're providing supports around professional learning so teachers get what they need to be able to implement the strategy, as well as a constant thought around wellness so that teachers are coming into this work in a way that is refreshing, that's not as heavy as the lift and burden of teaching throughout the course of the year, and that is rewarding for them. And so we're working on making sure that's the experience our teachers and leaders feel in the summer, and you'll hear a little bit about that today. And I think with that, Laura, I can hand it off to you to walk us through the key points. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. And good afternoon, everyone. So I'm excited to share the 2022 summer plan. So what's going to be the same is we're going to take a multi-tiered approach to summer learning, balancing academic, social emotional learning, and enrichment opportunities. We're going to continue partnerships with certain providers, and we're going to support the continuum of offerings, including but not limited to district-wide seats in STEM, arts, credit recovery, and other variety of offerings. So we'll go to the next slide. But what we're working on that's a little different this summer, and I think a pretty big shift for us, is that the summer will really focus on the continuation of the academic recovery work from the school year. We will be providing a wide array of credit earning opportunities and recovery opportunities at the 9-12 level. We're also expanding YouthWorks quite a bit, so that overlap between credit recovery and YouthWorks, so students can participate in both at a much larger scale. We piloted that last year, but we're going to have it at a much larger scale. And we're going to be launching, which we're super excited about, school-based summer learning sites that will be focused on academic recovery and enrichment, that will be staffed by City Schools teachers, and it will be anchored in City Schools curriculum. This is all in an effort to increase access for all students to meaningful summer learning opportunities. We're going to go to the next slide. Our priorities for K-8 are to increase the number of district-funded seats. We have a laser-like focus on academic recovery and literacy and mathematics, offering full day for 6 weeks, Monday through Thursday. And we'll have enrichment, field trips, science and technology opportunities, and we'll be supporting tutoring and embedding that as we can throughout the programs. For 9-12, we'll be expanding opportunities for students at those grade levels, prioritizing students who need to earn credits as a result of unfinished learning, and really leveraging national guidance on high quality high school summer programming to inform our approach to summer. This year, we're taking really a 4-prong approach to summer. There's the school-based programming, which I talked a little bit about, but I'll talk more in detail in a minute. We'll have our district-operated programming. That's some of the traditional programming, like our credit recovery, our high school EL site. We'll have some new ones that I think everyone will be pretty excited about. And then we have our partner vendor-operated programs. And we will also offer for any student personalized learning platforms. And I'll talk about all those in just a second. As I go through each of these slides, I just want to let you know that there's some details in the appendix on the different program types for each, and I'll mention that again as we get to those that are appropriate. For our school-based, this is new, our elementary K-8 model, we're hoping to have up to 25-30 sites. Schools can opt in this year. We're going to be talking more with principals about this tomorrow. It'll be a 6-week, 23-day program. In the morning, it will be an academic focus with ELA and mathematics with district-provided curriculum. And in the afternoon, they can partner with a provider to have an enrichment opportunity for the students. So for students, it'll be a full day. For teachers, it would be closer to half a day with planning. And we'll be embedding SEL in the morning. So it'll be the ELA math with the SEL embedded. We'll be prioritizing tutoring. It'll be staffed by members of that school with students from that school, right? So as much as possible, it's going to be the continuation for those students. Ideally, they're with their same teacher, but at least they're with a teacher in that building. And we're going to highly recommend it for those with unfinished learning still. But it'll be open to the students in that school. Go to the next slide. For high schools, we're looking at up to 10 sites. Again, in person, aligned to the district credit recovery program, 6 weeks, 2 hours per course for 23 days with a total of 46 hours of seat time. And the exciting part of this is they can also offer some of the credit recovery options we don't offer in the traditional program. The traditional program, we offer really the core courses that are aligned to the graduation, but they could offer IB, they could offer honors, they could offer unique CTE courses that students might need credit recovery at those school-based programs. So it would be in addition, so students could recover all sorts of credits. They could come for the district or they could go to the school. So that's an option. Again, as I mentioned, in the appendix, you can actually see some of these programs we're talking about, but we're going to have over 8,600 seats in district operated programs. These are a mix of in-person and virtual. The programming is offered by the district and available to all students in the district. It'll be select sites across the city that offer academic and enrichment programming. This includes our high school credit recovery, our EL high school program. It includes, some new programs like we have a Spanish theater camp we're going to be offering this year. We have some fine arts offerings. We have some pop-up sports. So it's a combination of some of the stuff we've been doing like algebra, but also some new stuff, which I'm pretty excited about. So take a look at those offerings. We can talk more about any of them that you're interested in. Go to the next slide. And then we have our partner vendor operated programs. We have over 6,600 seats here. Those again are in-person and virtual. The programs are offered by a partner who's operating as a vendor and available to all students across the city. It's again aligned to academic instruction coupled with enrichment opportunities. These are full days. These include some amazing options like Young Audiences, Elevate. We have Ailey, which is this year going to be at Peabody, which I'm pretty excited about. It won't be at Towson, but I think Peabody is a pretty exciting alternative. So that's going to be available to students. And again, those are in the appendix. And lastly, we'll have our personalized learning programs that are available open to all students. They're online, they're independent, they're self-paced learning programs that students can access from anywhere with a device. This includes Amplify, iReady, Zern, Discovery Education, Achieve 2000, Imagine Math, and Apex. Our next steps are to begin engaging schools in the school-based program. We're starting that tomorrow morning, so we wanted to share with you, and we're going to hit the ground running starting tomorrow. Developing systems to ensure that we have effective implementation of these school-based programs, and message early and often with students, families about these opportunities and making sure that this is the kickstart of that. So unless Dr. Dabrowski or Mark has anything they want to add, we can open it up for questions.
No, let's prioritize the time for questions because I'm sure there are lots of thoughts and questions. So let's jump on in. Commissioner Griffin.
Hello. I'm really excited about this presentation and thinking about extended learning and wraparound learning during the summer. So thank you all for this work. I have a question around how many seats are going to be available for some of the school-based options that are specifically for the students who need to go back and achieve some more credits or get some extended learning. I was curious about that, so I'll leave it there for my first question.
So specifically with the school-based program or overall, I think overall we're shooting for about 20,000 seats to give you a sense. School-based is very hard. I'm going to be very transparent for me to predict because we have to start with sharing it with schools and seeing how many are interested. I think if Joan and Mark are okay with this, we could come back in a month or so and give you a better sense. But as of right now, we're looking at up to 25 to 30 elementary, middle schools, and up to 10 high schools. And those could range anywhere from 100 to 200 students, maybe 300, but I think that would be pushing it probably closer to the 100, 200 range, so you can get a sense of that.
That's right. To build on that, Commissioner Griffin, we had a great meeting earlier today with the ILEDs around the needs of schools and ascertaining how many families are going to want to have a seat at the school, how many teachers will be available to teach this summer, and then knowing some of that data, knowing what we have available can help us discern schools that will be open and can have the same students returning, district programs, or we can say, okay, if a school isn't open, they have construction, something's not happening, we have district-wide programming they can engage in. So this is an iterative process as we learn more about the family's needs and our own staff capacity to want to come back and be able to come back after this long year of teaching. So we know we have up to 25, 30 in the school-based and up to 20,000 we're going for, but a lot of students in total, but a lot of it is going to be driven by demand from families and, quite frankly, the supply of teachers that we're going to be able to support coming back and teaching in the summer. And so we're happy to come back with updates on that as needed.
Yeah, that would be great, because I would be curious to hear more about both of those pieces, because that was going to be my next follow-up question is, like, what have we seen as far as demand from parents and students, and then also on the staff side, what are we hearing as far as capacity or folks who are actually going to be able to step into these classrooms with our students this summer. So I would love to hear some follow-up about that.
Sure. Commissioner Reed.
Hey, how are you doing today?
It's a beautiful day in Baltimore City, Commissioner Reed.
Great. Wish I was outside. I guess my first point is getting back to Commissioner Griffin's question. You said 20,000 kids total. So I looked at your numbers, and you have 8,600 for district, 6,600 for partner vendor. So you're saying roughly 5,000 for school-based?
Yeah, up to. That's our goal.
Okay, got you. Okay, these are my two questions. My first is, I'm the least conversant in terms of academics. So can you just give me the definition, distill, and describe what academic recovery means? That's the first one. And I guess my second question is, what's the difference between springboard and ODEL education? I mean, you described it, but I still didn't understand.
Sure. I can tackle both of those. So first, when we think about student recovery, over the last 2 years, based on all the disruption caused by the pandemic, going into all virtual learning, where some students had access, others didn't, coming back into in-person learning, all the disruptions that came there. Across multiple grade levels, students did not have access to the academic experience they had pre-COVID, and that caused many students to fall behind grade level. Some of those students were already behind grade level and fell further behind. And so now when we talk about academic recovery, we're talking about specific strategies to help students accelerate their learning and get as caught up as possible to grade level as quickly as possible, in a general sense. Secondly, ODEL education and springboard are for the next presentation when we talk about the high quality instructional materials that we're bringing forward to propose for our secondary students. Laura, would you add anything around how we think about academic recovery, particularly in summer school?
No, I think the only thing I might add is the goal of the school-based summer programming is, these schools have worked with the students to create SLPs. They've worked with these students to identify personalized learning, a cadence of personalized learning, and the ability to continue that to the summer, through the summer, to support that academic recovery is just a huge part of this work. And you kind of spoke to it, Mark, but I just wanted to reiterate the reason we did this. And in all the other programs, especially like the Young Audiences, for example, we assess the students too. We look at their data and we address the skills that we see that need addressing. So that's all part of that academic recovery. There is only one thing that might be helpful is there is Springboard Collaborative, which is a summer program that isn't the same as the Springboard curriculum. So that might have been, that might be a point. And Springboard Collaborative is a K2, K3 reading intervention for students. That's a summer program. It's quite strong, and we do offer that in as part of that school-based offering that schools can do. If that was your question, Commissioner Reed.
Yeah, I think I was ahead of myself in terms of the.
Okay, I just didn't know if you had seen
your
Springboard
presentation,
Collaborative,
yeah,
which might have caused.
I'm just looking at my notes and I'm ahead of myself, but thank you for the summer recovery information. Thank you.
No worries. Commissioner Chinia.
Commissioner
Okay.
Reed is ready. He's ready for you all today.
About time. Thank you.
Commissioner Chinia, I see your hand.
Yeah, my question was really more around the staffing issue. It appears, and I'm listening to you, and so I guess this is really my question. Will there be opportunities for staffing for current staff to apply to within all four of these formats? You mentioned school-based. I'm assuming that some of our staff would do district. Are vendors and partners going to be possibly hiring our staff?
Yeah, I would love to answer that question. So let me start with the one that's a no, because the personalized learning platforms, really the students will be doing on their own. So that
okay,
one,
okay, that was another one that I had was, is there going to be any type of check-in or something with those students, not just on their own totally? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that let me answer that in a minute, if you don't mind. So let me start with the staffing, just so I can, if you don't mind, Commissioner Chinia, so I can. So the personalized learning platforms are on their own. They're platforms that students can access and spend time doing and working on. That's the first. But the remainder, so we have the partner programs that are operating as vendors over the summer. Many of those hire our teachers. So for example, Young Audiences, the vast majority of the teachers that work in those programs are our teachers. However, if it's a program like Alvin Ailey, right, they are most likely hiring dance instructors. They have a staff from Peabody that will be working on the staff there. It's like a very unique opportunity, if that makes sense. So as appropriate, they definitely hire our teachers, but depending on the district-run programs are all our staff. So the fine arts camps, the pop-up sports, those are all our staff we're hiring. And the school-based programs are all our staff that we would be hiring. So that is the staffing question. The personalized learning platforms it's a really great question. It's an opportunity that we are kind of exploring at this point of how deep we're going to go as the district office with those. Of course, schools can, they work with their students now. They can feel free to, have a system for checking in with them and encouraging certain students. What we are really thinking about is making sure at least the information for families and providers throughout the city, like a YMCA or Parks and Recs who might have students, at least know about these that are available and might encourage students to get on them at a certain cadence. So I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Chinia, but that's kind of where we are with those personalized learning platforms. Mark, I don't know if you'd like to jump in, or Dr.
Yes,
Dabrowski.
I think to your point, Laura, the personalized learning platforms are opportunities for students to get more reps at the skills that they've practiced over the course of the year and can continue to practice in the summer. The extent to which an adult can check in with them is definitely worth exploring. I think that because it's designed to give students reps and it's an opportunity for the students to get immediate feedback, currently the design is for it to work in that way. I think if we have a school-based program where students are also doing that, there's certainly the opportunity for check-in. I think if there are students who are not in a school-based program and are not in a district program and are engaged in these personalized learning platforms, it makes me think about if that were my student that I was either receiving the next year or that I had just taught, I'd be curious to access that data. So that's something we can take back and look into. So I think part of your question is, if they're using this time to practice on these platforms, where does it go? And I think that that's worth us exploring.
Thank you. Yeah, because that was that was really where I was headed in terms of with all of these. And I'm saying assessment in the broadest of terms, but you know, how will we assess or get the data of what these experiences have done for our students? So yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Griffin, I see your hand is up.
Yes, just to kind of reiterate what Commissioner Chenia said, I feel like if we, with students checking in on the personalized learning platforms, two things come to mind for me. One is if a student has an issue or has a question, like who can they go to? So even if it's just having a point person that they could at least contact in case something comes up, I think that would be a really good, like, nice stopgap, and letting the students know, like, we're still here for you. There's still somebody you can talk to if there's an issue that comes up. But then also making sure we don't miss the opportunity, like Commissioner Cheney was saying, of getting that data, because it would be really interesting to see, like, okay, we had X amount of students engage in these personalized learning platforms over the summer, and when they came back and they took these diagnostics for the courses they're taking for their next school year, this is where they were versus students who maybe did not engage at all with any activities over the summer or any personalized learning platforms over the summer. So it kind of just gives us an understanding of how these things can help support our students in increasing their learning during the summer, and pushing them further along their learning journey when they return. So I just think that would just be good data for us to have to understand how to better utilize those platforms. The only other thing that comes to mind for me with this is historically, and I know we are in a very interesting time when it comes to history. And so almost pandemic aside, like before that, when we had our summer programs, like how many students did we have participate historically in any of these offerings that we had before? I'm just curious around that to see if that can help us also project possibly an increase or an influx, because this will be one of the like first real summers that our students will have had to be able to fully come back into a lot more programming, right? A lot more robust programming. And so just thinking about what that data could help us figure out if there needs to be any more seats added. Yeah.
So, Rhonda, do you want to talk a little bit? You put something in the chat, but and to Rhonda's point, we will have a call center, just so you know, Commissioner Griffin, that's available to any family member that can call all summer. Rhonda, did you want to talk a little bit about what you put in the chat real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out there that we are working with all of the content, district content folks that have parent-facing documents that will support this, the various platforms where a parent, it will have all of the information they need to be able to access it. It will have a contact person at the district level who is familiar, you know, the expert in that platform, as well as a contact at the platform level who can support parents, families who have questions. And then we also have a summer helpline that we hire bilingual staff over the summer to support that, who we will provide professional development around how to support families who will be calling in with perhaps questions around those platforms.
And then Commissioner Griffin, to answer your question about evaluation, I think your flag around the personalized learning platforms is a really important one that we'll take back, both you and Commissioner Chinia. We also do quite robust evaluation of the programming. I think you guys usually receive that update. We do looking at pre and post, we look at attendance. Your question around how many, I'd have to get the exact numbers. I will say also, prior to last summer, we didn't have the flexibility in the budget we do now. And so we often had wait lists for our programs. And last summer, we really didn't want to have to turn anybody away. Our goal was to have more seats than students, right? We didn't want to have 20,000 more seats than students. And I think we ended up with a few thousand less than the seats we offered, and we had offered about 17,000 seats, which is pretty exciting. One of the other things, to your point, we're back in, fully functioning, but one of the biggest lessons we had from the pandemic was that, at least at the high school level, offering a virtual option was incredibly helpful to some students, especially if they had a flexible work schedule or they wanted to work nights or so we will always have a virtual high school option. It didn't work for every kid, let me be really honest about that, but there was a group of students it worked really well for. And so we offered it last summer, and we are, at this point, I don't see us changing that unless there's a drastic decline in interest for it. So I'm glad you flagged that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And that virtual piece, I feel like you said, it's here to stay because of where we're headed in society, for sure.
I think a part of it too may be collaborating with our virtual learning programs that currently exist, right? Like, how are they working? How are they gathering and collecting data, and how can that inform our practice throughout the summer and in years to come? I also just want to reiterate, the way that we are composing our data story, right? And Laura, you mentioned a little bit about it. Like, we do get updates, like in September or October, whenever they come to us about how summer learning went. But it also makes me think about how we recruit, how we publicize, how we recruit staff, but how we also publicize to families the importance of these programs that you all have selected, right? So we select these programs because we know that they work, and we've got data that can prove that. And as a result, right, how do we encourage specific families they can choose what they want, but how do we encourage specific families to kind of target their summer learning in a more efficient way, so that when we hear updates about how summer learning went, we can really see some growth in our students as we're focused on recovery. So I think about that, and it also makes me just want to make sure that we have sites that are geographically diverse, within the city. So making sure, when we think of equity and access, just making sure that all of our young people have access to the myriad of options that exist throughout our city. And I think Ailey moving to Peabody is great, because now they're moving into the city and out of Baltimore County. I think that's great. And then finally, I appreciate the work of the team, but finally, there's this thing that I always grapple with, and it is the word literacy. And so I saw that term on slide 8. So we're focusing on literacy and math. What does literacy is very broad. So what does that mean? What will the actual focus be?
This came up in previous conversations. I appreciate you raising it, Commissioner McFadden, because we're having the same conversation, not only in teaching and learning, but across the system. In summer school, we will be focusing on extending at the grade levels English language arts, the courses that they've been taking during the course of the year. In high school, same for the English 1, English 2, et cetera courses. And, and I think connecting the piece around data and personalized learning and what we're learning about what helps our students accelerate, something that keeps coming back to us is the difference between English language arts and the broader term literacy across all content areas. And so that's something that we're exploring, feeding into our professional learning across content, so that we can start to build capacity everywhere when it comes to the approach to literacy. But specifically in the summer school context, we're referring to the English language arts courses that students have experienced over the course of the year.
If I could just add a little to that, Mark, we're also talking about it. So for example, in an Elevate program, it is a social justice curriculum that is built in literature around social justice. It's the Children's Defense Fund curriculum, so it's a very specific literacy heavy curriculum. At the Ailey, they do a lot of literacy work around sort of self-awareness and body awareness and writing and expressing about yourself. So there is a literacy component there that's really focused, even though they're doing this amazing dance program. I know you know it, Commissioner McFadden, because I think you're as big of a fan as I am, but But there's a literacy component there that that aligns back to the instruction that they're getting and the support. So there's also this thread of literacy in a lot of our partner programs that is one of the expectations when we partner with them. So I just wanted to add that, Mark.
Thanks, and I appreciate you, Mr. Etienne, by just highlighting that, right? Because there should be literacy in every content area, right? We want our students to be literate at the foundation in all of the content areas that we have our students experiencing. So I just wanted to raise that because I just grapple with it, right? What are we specifically saying? So this summer, we're specifically focusing on English language arts, mathematics, and then giving some enrichment opportunities outside of that. But as we move forward, you know, just really thinking, I'm glad the team and the system is really grappling with what literacy means, especially with those student learning plans and all of this personalized learning that's happening. I think that's really important.
One of our norms is staying hopeful. What's been giving me hope, I wanted to add this piece, Commissioner McFadden, is that I want to be clear, we're not starting from a basement level trying to figure that out. There are many examples across the district where teachers, quite frankly, and other educators are currently engaging in literacy in their content areas and have really thought about this. It's just not something that we've organized and codified and really make sure happens consistently across the board. So we want to start with where we know we have expertise. We want to start with the schools that are doing a great job of this and bring them into the fold. I didn't want anyone to misinterpret the idea that this is novel and we have to figure it out. I think that we have some examples that we want to bring in and begin to build on top of.
Appreciate that. Thanks team. Thanks for this work, and thanks to the board colleagues for this discussion. Always enjoy it. Thank you all so much. And we look forward to hearing more updates on summer learning. There are some, follow-ups that we want to get, numbers and, all of that, and enrollment, like all of that, faculty, all of that. And I'm sure we'll get that on the back end in the fall as well. So thank you all for your service and your sacrifice and your commitment. We're now ready to go to item 2.02, the 9 through 12 ELA high quality instructional materials presentation.
Great, excellent. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to share some really exciting work that we have been doing in the area of high quality instructional materials, specifically for our high school students in English language arts. Today, we're coming to the board to provide you our most up-to-date information on where we are in this process, and to really bring forward our recommendation and what we hope will be finalized in procurement over the next couple of weeks, so that we can do a final procurement here later this month around a recommendation for high quality materials for our English language arts in high school. So I'm going to get us started, and then I'm going to ask my colleague Mark to join in after I sort of set this up. So if we go to the next slide. Again, we want to just talk a little bit about the vision for how we got to this work, what our recommendation is. We're going to have a chance to introduce the two options we're looking at, and then talk briefly about where we are around implementation. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that having this new curriculum work has to be connected to our priorities. So we're going to make sure that we highlight on the next slide here where we see this alignment with the board's strategic priorities. Again, ensuring that we have effective, relevant, and rigorous instruction to engage our students requires high quality instructional materials. Thinking about how we go about this work with engaging stakeholder voices, you're going to really see that called out in this presentation. We always are thinking about how we make sure that all of our students have an opportunity to access and have that ability to, experience materials that are, again, thoughtfully selective and mindful of the full scope of who our students and families are. And again, we really want to make sure that we're thinking about an inclusive academic and professional environment. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Here's where this lives in our, graphic around R3. So we're looking at materials that are going to support the personalized work of student learning that really will help around this acceleration, and then how we use time with our students with these materials. So all of these things kind of merge together. If we go to the next slide. You can see here where we unpack this in our strategies. High quality instructional materials is really that first step in that acceleration. So again, the materials and that we've been looking at are all aligned with the MSDE standards. They have been given the green light from Ed Reports, who really tell us that this is high quality. So again, this all fits into our R3 work. We go to the next slide. You'll see here that as the team began this work, there was really setting the stage for what our high school students deserve and what we know about adolescent readers and writers. And so the importance of choice, the importance of culturally responsive teaching and learning. We know that having an opportunity to learn about the world matters for our young people. We wanted to make sure that we use text to anchor the questions that we ask and that we push students to go into the text to get those answers and to show their thinking. We wanted to see that we had materials that would support writing across all kinds of genres. So opinion writing, information writing, narrative writing. We know that vocabulary is critical for the development of our students. We wanted there to be opportunities for the curriculum to support collaboration, for students to work with their peers. We always think about our continuum of learners, our students who are learning English, our students who may have disabilities, our students who are gifted and advanced, and how materials can reach all of those learners. And we also wanted the materials to be easy for our colleagues to navigate. We wanted the accessibility to work with these materials to be as easy as possible. Sometimes curricula can become very, very cumbersome and hard to navigate. So these were some of the pieces that drove this request for looking at materials for our high school English language arts program. So if we go to the next slide, this work actually began quite a long time ago. We went through a formal RFP solicitation. We, again, organized a review committee. They did a lot of deep analysis work looking at a number of different programs. And we came to a space where we had two choices that really emerged as the top two. And so then we went out and did something that I am really, really proud of in terms of some collaborative stakeholder engagement. And Mark's going to talk more about this. But we went through a level of engagement with our colleagues, our school-based colleagues, our teachers, our school leaders, our principals, department heads, assistant principals. We also went and we talked to our families. We talked to our students. We did in-person engagement opportunities and we did virtual engagement opportunities. We went all in to listen to voices. And when you do that, you hear important themes and messages, and you have a responsibility to really act on that feedback. And so what we're bringing forward to the board today is a result of that authentic stakeholder engagement work and what might feel like a somewhat unconventional recommendation, which is actually to go forward with two programs, to offer the opportunity for schools to let us know which program best fits for their schools. Because what we learned from our school-based engagement is that people had equal appreciation for both programs. And so the data is quite compelling. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll see a little bit more about what this looked like. So between October and November, we heard from, like I said, 30 central office leaders, over 230 of school leaders who we presented this to at our school staff meeting. We had over 2,400 students talk to us about these programs and really heard from them. And again, it's just really exciting to see we had a website set up and over 3,000 clicks. That meant people were going to the website and trying to learn about these programs. So that engagement series really produced a lot of helpful feedback and input that we had to take in as we made a decision and made this as we're making this recommendation here today. So let's keep going here. And I think when we think about our student voices, again, there was a special protocol that our team created for students to be able to reflect on an opportunity to have new materials. And we wanted to hear from them what mattered around choice, the types of text, the things they were asked to do, working with their peers. And again, we had over, close to 3,000 students responding to this work in over 36 schools. So it was just really, for me, having done this work in many places, I have never seen this level of student engagement. And it is so exciting to sort of listen to our students about what they care about. They have a lot to tell us, and we need to listen. And our school-based educators have a lot to tell us, and we need to listen. So it's with all of that engagement that we're coming to you with our recommendation. And again, if we go to the next slide here, what we learned is that both of these programs have what we believe our students deserve with our high school ELA curriculum. Both of them do. They're high quality. There's choices between them. And we know that having the buy-in from the school level is important, because they're going to be the ones that have to work with these materials, plan with these materials, help their students with these materials. And that implementation is at the heart of this. So having a heavy-handed singular approach come from the district is really not something we thought we could come forward with a level of belief. Now, we know that this is an unconventional approach to say we're going to go forward with two, because it leads to other kinds of decisions. How will schools choose? What will, why would one school choose one thing and not the other? So there's lots of implementation that we'll dig into. But our key takeaways from this engagement process was that was the right work to do. Because when we ask for that input from our educators and from our students and from our families, we have a responsibility to listen and have that help inform our decisions. So those have been the key takeaways. Let's go to the next slide here. So we are coming forward today with our recommendation that we move forward with both of these programs, that we allow schools to choose their program, that we work with those challenges and opportunities of what it means to support two programs, and we come up with strategies for how we support across that, again, across all of our schools, knowing there are two programs out there. And at this point, what I'd like to do now, if we go to the next slide, is really have Mark introduce you to these two options and talk more about the work that he and his team have done to bring us this far. So Mark, I'll have you go ahead and get us started.
Yep, thank you very much, Chief Dabrowski. I want to start by saying that to get to this point, I want to sincerely thank the literacy team and many of the other members that were part of the team that did a lot of work around the engagement. In particular, I want to thank Brooke Korch and Arthur Satie for different reasons. I think behind the scenes, Brooke Korch has really organized a lot of information to help many of us just process what this means and how to ensure that we are listening not only to the teachers and the students, but to all the different stakeholders around this decision. And Arthur Satie led the actual committee and had to kind of facilitate and shepherd and keep them organized and focused. And in both of them doing that, I think we've been able to learn a few things about not only collaboration across multiple offices, multiple mindsets, but also about how to keep the students at the center of the decision. And that's what we're really focused on here. So I wanted to shout them out before we get started. So Commissioner Reed, this is where we're going to answer the question around the difference between Odell education and Springboard. If we go to the next slide, I'll start by just framing how we got here and what we're looking for. First, it's really important that we target and focus on what our students need above all else. And in particular, they signaled to us that they both needed more engagement around what they're learning. So when we think about cultural relevance, why does this matter to me? Why am I learning this? How does this apply to my immediate life? But quite frankly, they also wanted to make sure that what they're doing sets them up for success, not only in college, but in career. And so that was one of the major lenses that we used across all the different criteria for both of these curricula. Let's go to the next slide. And so when we think about what both programs bring to the table, right, the idea, again, around engagement, reimagining what it looks like to learn in the ELA setting, in the English setting, and how students are involved in that and the way in which teachers engage them. In both cases, the opportunity to do that was made available by the curricula. Again, ensuring that students have a clear pathway from the beginning of high school towards the end to a college or career pathway, and that they're ready for both. We wanted to make sure that both curricula provided opportunities for that and usability from the teacher's perspective to be able to set their students up for those successes. And so those supports needed to be embedded in the instruction. We didn't want teachers to experience the curriculum and then scratch their heads trying to figure out where to go to pull resources. We wanted to see that support was embedded in what's available to them. Now, to be fair and to be clear, teaching's an art. So we know that teachers will always have to pull in things and figure things out for their kids. That's part of the beauty of teaching, but we didn't want a curriculum leaving them hanging. And so that was also part of the vetting process. Essential to us was being able, through instruction, through day-to-day general instruction, to support the full continuum of learners. And by full continuum of learners, we literally mean all learners. So whether a student is a GAL student, whether a student has an IEP, an English learner, regardless of where they are in the continuum, a teacher, in implementing their curriculum and planning their lessons, should be required to think about all the different learners. And we looked for that in both curriculum. And again, Ed Reports is the organization that kind of assigns scores to different curricula and vets them. And both of these curricula had the highest rating on the Ed Reports. I want to just pause for a moment to see if there are any immediate clarifying questions before we move on. Double check the chat. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so let's start with Odell Education. The key thing to know about Odell is that it's a newer pedagogical approach and unit structure. What that means for our teachers is it will mean a shift from what they've been using in the instructional guides and the curriculum that they've been using. It's more focused on the student and the student's experiences and how the students engage both with each other, the teacher, and the curriculum than they may have previously experienced. And so you'll see this idea of collaborative communities at every grade level, where students are engaging with each other more in dialogue, more speaking and listening activities. There's a year-long project that the students work on and culminate over time, which is different than what we'll talk about in a minute with the other curricula. So this is much more focused on student experience, student activities, and the way in which they engage. Within there, obviously, are stronger opportunities for student speaking and listening. If you go back for one slide for a second, Casey, thanks. Also, you see that in this idea of a year-long project, the standards, the skills, the different texts are incorporated into that structure. So by the end of the year, a student has completed a project, and in preparing and building that project, they've utilized the text, they've met the standards, they've engaged in those skills. And again, through that idea of a project, you see more opportunity for relationship among students and within a community of a class, and maybe even across a grade level, depending on how the school is organized. Through this idea of the year-long project and the way in which the curriculum is organized, there are multiple modes of assessing students. And so whether it's through the speaking and listening, the writing, the quick check-ins after lessons, there are all different types of ways to assess students, which is great because teachers can pull from different sources to measure how students are performing. Again, English learners, special education students, gifted students, there should be differentiation in all lessons, and through the continuum of learners, this prism of reaching all students, we should see that tied in every lesson through the Odell curriculum. And there's a level of diversity among the texts, the topics, all aligned again to those year-long projects. Some of the opportunities around this curriculum, again, it's a new pedagogical approach. It's a departure from the unit structure, the kind of Wiggins and McTighe backwards planning structure that teachers in our high schools and secondary levels may be accustomed to. And it's a deeper focus on the student themselves and their knowledge, their habits, their abilities, the actual culture and knowledge they bring to the classroom. Teachers have a chance to think through the developmental units that they want to teach, but there's a foundation that we will establish across the Office of Teaching and Learning that kind of set the frame for them that are non-negotiable. So we create a construct within them to use, and then they get a chance to be able to think through knowing their students, knowing what their students are passionate about, and the available texts and resources to them. They have a chance for choice and agency there. There's not as much MCAP-like assessment in the Odell education curriculum. Again, it's student-centered focused. It's focused on a project and building skills through that opportunity. And so for students to sit down and practice MCAP-like assessments is something that this curriculum does not have as much of. And I think something that we'll note for both curricula is the need for strong bandwidth at home and for students to have one-to-one devices to access the full range of digital opportunities. Pretty much everything that's available in person for both curricula is also available digitally. And the ability for the students to access that will hinge on the bandwidth they have for Wi-Fi and the ability for them to manage a device one-to-one. So that's an overview of Odell. I can take questions here. We can move on to Springboard, and then we can talk about both. It depends on how soon you want to ask questions.
So you mentioned this new pedagogical approach, right? So what does a lesson look like? What would a lesson, what would a 9th grade or 10th grade lesson look like?
I'll honestly, Commissioner McFadden, speak to it to a higher level. I think it looks like a series of approaches through a novel per quarter. So the students study a novel, they dig into that novel, and what they're gaining from that novel is going to apply towards tasks that lead them to a culminating writing project or presentation about what they've learned for the novel. So within there would be reading of text, it would be a lot of Q&A, peer-to-peer discussions, in some cases, some presentations, which deviates from a lot of the guided reading type of structures you might have seen in previous high school, not necessarily guided reading, but I'm missing I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. Bear with me for one.
I follow
Close
you,
reading. That's what I was looking for.
Close
reading strategies that you might see in some of the other lessons. So more student engagement, more peer-to-peer, different text across the year, as opposed to in the other curricula, which we'll talk about in a moment, a more consistent, more structured approach to the daily lessons and the quarters.
And I see Chair Emeritus, I see your hand, but one more question. If we have limited MCAT-like assessments, I know that can't always be our focus in teaching and learning, but how are we going to ensure that we're aligning what is happening in the classroom to what we know our students have to, we know how they have to perform as far as the state directs us to perform? Am I making sense?
You're making perfect sense. That's the right question. In both curricula, we want to make sure that from starting with the student level, as well as with teachers, school leaders, ILEDs, ACLs, everyone has to be clear on what's expected of students on any of the state level assessment or beyond, SAT beyond. Right. And so being able to clearly articulate where that is and isn't in both curricula is essential in our professional learning work this summer and beyond. More than likely, we may have a heavier lift with this in Odell, and I'll explain more about Springboard when we get to that. But we're going to have to bring our resources around to not only be clear about it, but build in the support for teachers so that students have access to what they need to be prepared for MCAT and to SAT. And that's work that we'll have to think through at the implementation level as we get deeper into the curriculum and how we set up support for the teachers to onboard it.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Chinia.
Yeah, my question was around a little more explanation of you mentioned the year-long research project. And then as I listened to you talk about sort of the units going through, that was making sense. So can you explain a little bit more about the year-long? Is this sort of the traditional type of research paper? Is it done individually? Is this a part of the group experience?
Yeah. So when I think about the newer pedagogical approach, and I think about what this looks like if we were to enter a classroom during this time, I think there would be a varied approach to the presentation types. In some cases, depending on the grade level, depending on the novel, it could very much look like an essay that was written, and whether it's an opinion essay or a different type. It could also look like a group of students doing a presentation around something that's happening in real time in their community based on what they've learned from the novel. And so what I'm thinking is we should probably come up with some examples to show what these look like in real time. I know that Brooke is on the call and she's done a lot of deep work around this with Odell, but they vary. And they cover, the thing that I can say is they cover the writing expectations, the speaking expectations, the listening expectations. There are opportunity for multimedia approaches for students to use that and how they demonstrate their knowledge. There are multiple ways for secondary students to demonstrate their knowledge through this kind of year-long approach than we've seen in like the unit by unit by unit type of structure. But I think it would be worthwhile, especially as we move forward in the process, to create more and more explicit examples of what that looked like, both to Commissioner Fadden's question and to yours, because it can seem kind of, when you think about anything that's newer, the more you can see it and understand it, I think the better it is for understanding it. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I appreciate that push.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, let us pivot now to Springboard. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, when we think about what Springboard curricula look like, it is similar to the pedagogical approach we've used. When we think about our instructional guides, backwards design, the Wiggins and McTighe approach, we think about what it is that students need to learn, what the big idea and essential questions are, and then how we organize around that. This looks a lot more like that. Again, text-dependent questioning, deep diving into text and close reading workshop is a lot of what we see in this curriculum. There is text diversity, and you have multiple types of text around a topic, which is important because that's what the standards demand at the secondary level. So we see the alignment that we need to MCAP, to the Maryland College and Career Readiness Standards. This curriculum was designed parallel to what those demands are. The units are back mapped to them and have embedded assessments so that we can see along the way, both formatively and long-term, how students are performing in the classroom along the expectations of the standard and the MCAP assessment. And there are some opportunities for peer-to-peer collaboration embedded throughout. The opportunities, thank you, Casey, you can move on. The opportunities here is that with Springboard, there is one novel that will be used at a grade level for the entire year. And so when the Ed Reports organization vetted them, they focused their vetting aligned to that core text. And so all the lessons and everything that's designed in the curricula is around that kind of pathway around that text. So if teachers wanted to bring in a different text or other text, there wouldn't be the lesson planning, the kind of differentiated and embedded assessments that would go with that. And so this is a more rigid, more kind of stricter curriculum than Odell is, in that in Odell, you have a novel per quarter and different activities around those novels. There are 6 total novels for the year in Odell by grade level. And then, we get into how many of those we choose some, the teachers choose some. Here with Springboard, there's 1 novel for the year with other texts that support it, but it's a lot more structured with less flexibility. And again, with Springboard, there's a need for strong bandwidth in the home and in schools, the ability for students to have one-to-one devices to take advantage of the digital suite that's available in Springboard, very much like with Odell. Let me pause here for a moment and see if I can invite either Brooke, Chief Dabrowski, or anyone else from the team that's been working closely on this to add anything in that I might have missed. We've done a lot of work around this, a lot of information to share here, but want to make sure we leave time for questions. I just want to chime in and see if there's anything else anyone would like to add before we start to field and answer questions.
I will, Mark. This is Brooke. Hope you guys can hear me. I think the one thing I would go back and add to Odell is one of the conversations that we've had is, we recognize the need to have MCAP aligned assessments, and obviously the assessments embedded in the curriculum are rich and necessary, but they have acknowledged that they will work with us to create MCAP aligned assessments if we should, if we have that need. So it's really a non-issue. It's just about, what those would look like. I think the only other thing I'd add is that, like Mark said, both options are obviously available in, print and can be done well, but obviously both have that digital component that obviously enhances the experience.
Thanks, Brooke. All right, so let's pause here. Love to hear some reactions, questions, thoughts, any ideas, feedback. Commissioner Reed, then Commissioner Chinia, then Commissioner Griffin.
This is a thought feedback. This presentation was pretty erudite, which is good. That's a compliment. But the flip side of the coin is a layperson like me does not understand what you're talking about. And it gets back to what Commissioner McFadden said earlier. Maybe in your presentations, you want to give some examples of what constitutes springboard and what constitutes Odell, and an example of how that would go through that whole annual process or summer process. Because it's really high level, and I would say people like me got lost.
Yeah, I received that feedback, Commissioner Reed. I thought of it as I was listening to Commissioner McFadden's question. You really need to see it. And what I'm excited about is when we were going through the engagement process, we provided a number of opportunities for teachers, staff members, families to dig into these materials to see it. We should offer the same opportunity again as we continue to go through the choice process. So we will signal opportunities. We'll provide resources so that you all can have that and some examples. That's a really, really good push. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think it was Commissioner Chinia and then Griffin.
Mine is a wondering, and I guess a bit of a, it's not really a concern, but as I read this and I listened, I agree that both have some very positive aspects to them. In consulting with schools as they make a choice, to what extent are we going to be, or the staff going to be looking at sort of the level of proficiency within the staff for these choices? For example, you said Odell was a newer pedagogy and some, newer way of looking. I would imagine a springboard is one I know has been around, so people are probably more familiar, but is there going to be any coaching with folks around making this choice with one that might require some additional supports as well as time for development? Am I making sense with
You
that?
make a lot of sense, a ton of sense. I'm going to start this. I have a lot of thoughts about this, so I'm going to try to be brief, and then I'm going to invite Chief Dabrowski to add on. So first and foremost, regardless of which curriculum a school chooses, there will need to be coaching and support for teachers. There will need to be first a product orientation so that everyone can become familiar with how to use the curriculum, where to find everything, but then the idea of how to implement it at a rate that the students need and want. So you have to know your students well for either curriculum. And I think that's something that we have learned that some schools have really gotten really great at. Others maybe not as much. So that's part of the work we have to do. Secondly, in order to choose the right curricula, you really have to, I think school leadership needs to have a sense of what teachers can do at the moment, what they might not be able to do right now, and where they can get with support and coaching and where they can't. And we just had this conversation this morning with the instructional leadership executive directors around together thinking through, I don't want to call them conditions, but what are the needs that a school has to have, or what are the tools and resources and knowledge capacity a school has to have to best decide and use either curricula? There should be a level of awareness around that as a school before making the choice. And so we're working with ILEDs and other staff to help support schools through that thinking through process so they make a good decision. And I think the third thing is when we think about if we get to a place, our intent is to support both curriculum. And when we think about which schools or how many schools choose which curricula, that's going to also shift how we support. And so we're thinking very carefully about the team that we have, the knowledge base that we have, what we know about the curricula, and how many schools will need support in each of them. In a couple of slides, we'll talk about implementation. But I think in the end, the most important thing is that we meet teachers where they are, and that's going to take a level of understanding the curricula and providing consistent coaching support for teachers as they implement. That was a lot. I tried to keep it brief. I hope that makes sense, but I'll invite Joan to come in to kind of add on or flesh out some of the things that I said.
Mark, I think you did a great job. I think the selection process has to be thoughtful. We want to make sure there's almost sort of a self-assessment of if I've got this in my school, or if these are things that I've seen success with my students, then this is a good match for Springboard. Or if this is a thing that I really want to build out more opportunities for that student engagement piece that feels like it's really lacking right now, okay, I'm going to move towards Odell. So we have to work to highlight both the opportunities and the differences and the strengths of each of the programs and help guide our schools through the decision-making process. I think, as Mark said, that's the work we're doing right now, and trying to work really collaboratively across schools and academics and our school-based educators together to build out what that selection process looks like. Because you don't want it to be another sales pitch from a program and coming, because they're going to each say why their program is better. So there has to be a level of our digging in and looking closely at what does a lesson plan look like? You know, what does it mean? Am I going to have to toggle between 3 different things for a lesson and that type of thing? So we want there to be a real opportunity for educators to have an informed decision here with support from us. And again, I think as Mark's point is, some of this is unknown for us because we don't know where our schools will land. We're not sure if 20 schools are going to pick Springboard and 10 are going to, we don't know where that will land. And so we'll be ready to be responsive based on where we hear from our educators. And that feels really important to us right now, because our school people know best what they need in their schools. And so we as a district have to be ready to serve and support that, which is in many ways some innovative way of approaching this. So there's some uncertainty that we have to manage in this process. And that is, I think, the important work that we need to do.
And I would hope that, that the commitment when it's made it's multiple years, because
That's right.
If a school leader changes,
That's right.
We can't, I would not want to think that then we get, someone else will come in and want to flip. We're going to need some years to see that something is really working, so we can
That's
have
right.
some.
That's right. That's part of the process we're putting in place.
Okay.
Thanks. Yep. Commissioner Griffin.
First, I just have to say thank y'all so much for providing a choice. Choices on curriculum is huge when you talk about the school level, feeling like you have some type of decision making power about the curriculum that your students are going to be engaging with means a lot for educators. So I think that was really smart. And there are distinct differences I can see between the two. I have 2 questions. Well, really a question and a thought. My first question is, do we have any sense of how much training or professional development is necessary for each of the 2 different curriculums when we are talking about having the schools roll them out? So whether that be including the school leadership training to understand what the curriculum is, and then the training that has to go into the content team for them to utilize each different curriculum. And then the second one is more of just something for us to think about and just keep at the forefront of our minds. Both of them need strong bandwidth. Both of them need one-to-one student devices. And I feel like in order to implement this, in the best way and in all efficacy, is ensuring that we really have that in our schools where they're implementing these things. Because we don't want to put our educators in a situation where they're given a curriculum and they're very excited about it, but then when it goes to utilizing it, they're not able to access everything because the tools aren't there. So I think that goes into some of our conversations around budget and stuff that we'll be having soon, but definitely something that is just a big flag, I think, for board members, but also for district staff to think about at the school level.
That's right. I'll work backwards. I know that this is at the top of the list in terms of priority for our ITD team, Chief Tommy and all those that are working on this. I know that he's already and they're already thinking about what it means, not just for the HQIM, the high school curricula, but K12 across the board, getting to that space. So I'm glad that that's already in play, because that's going to play out here. So that's really good to know, as opposed to trying to start the conversation now. So that gives me peace and hope. I'll be honest, from my perspective, which is somewhat limited, both because I'm still relatively new to the role, but also I'm learning more as I get out to schools and talk with folks. I think that regardless of which curriculum is selected, we're going to need similar, if not the same amount of support in professional learning. Whether it's, Springboard and it's familiar to teachers, I think a new curriculum requires, orientation, how to use it, using it, sharing feedback, working with a coach, school walkthroughs to see what it looks like. And with a newer pedagogical approach, depending on the school context, the teachers that adopt it, we could see, anywhere from, grabbing it and running with it right away to struggling and needing the same type of support. So my thought process is both choices are going to require some product orientation, so there's clarity and ease and facility to access and use the resources, but also thoughtful and engaging professional learning opportunities outside of the classroom, but also while inside the classroom. So in real time, as it's being implemented, teachers can get feedback. I remember when we rolled out the Wit and Wisdom curricula, I remember doing walks with groups of principals in the classrooms that were not for accountability, that were not for judgment, that were not to beat teachers up, but just to better understand how was it implemented, why was it done that way, what did we learn from that, and how can we get better at it? I think that's going to be an engine that kind of turns in the beginning. And I think as we begin to see schools make progress, deepen their understanding, we're hoping to use those schools as examples where other schools can begin to learn more, the same that we did when we implemented Eureka, we implemented Wit and Wisdom. So I don't know that one will need more than the other. I think our approach is going to have to be very thoughtful and intentional about separating product orientation, getting used to the curricula, versus as it's implemented, supporting teachers through the process and learning with them in ways that take pressure off and really support them in their planning and implementation.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It'll definitely be a learning year, or two. The other wondering I have in my head is around difference in experience for students, depending on which curriculum their schools choose. And this goes for like, okay, how do students feel about the curriculum? What are they learning? Where would they place this curriculum on their rating scale? But also outcomes, like what do they leave with? What kind of knowledge, skill sets? What kind of impact are we having on the student's ability to do X, Y, Z standards when it comes to Maryland state standards? So I think having some kind of comparable chart for each of the curricula so that it's clear, like historically, maybe what has happened with each of them and where they fall as far as outcomes are concerned would be helpful for schools also to understand, like, okay, both of these curricula, they're very strong, and they allow our students to leave with the skills and the knowledge and the tools that we need them to. However, this one focuses more on XYZ. This one gives students more opportunity, like you said, for peer-to-peer discussion, Socratic seminar. It might be more opinion-based information. So just trying to make that a little bit more clear for schools and school-based staff when they're making their decision too.
Great suggestion. Appreciate that. Commissioner Reed, is that an old hand or do you have a new question?
Sold. Thank you.
Okay. So let's pivot for a moment to the implementation timeline. It's pretty straightforward. And when we think about our intention and what we're hoping to do, right, we're now in March. Hopefully within the next board meeting or after, we'll be able to present to the full board for a vote, finalize the contracts. And then April through June is a lot of what we just talked about. It's the development of the guidance, the support, helping through the selection process across offices, across roles and positions. And then summer PD on both orientation to the curricula, how to use it, planning for it, making sure that we can procure and provide the materials. And then we go in September where we implement, we support alongside implementation, learn from it, and then as we're observing what's happening, use that to feed how we're building our ongoing professional learning. And so the idea is to continue a feedback loop from teachers and leaders along the way. So as we design our summer learning, as we build our curriculum implementation plan, it's informing the needs of teachers and meeting them where they are. That's the intention, is to meet them where they are. This is a huge lift. There's a lot here, but teachers want it. Teachers have asked for it. And I think if we can meet them where we are, to Commissioner Chinia's and Griffin's point, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, with consistent implementation, we're hoping to see great outcomes for our kids. So this is the plan, intention. willing, hoping that if we can move forward with procurement, we'd be able to do this work. Chief Dabrowski, you want to add anything to that? Okay, Commissioner Chinia.
Just as I look at this implementation plan and think back to how we started the meeting with the growth of the summer programming, I guess you can see what I'm about to, or know what I'm about to say is we're gonna have to be very careful in terms of scheduling, because at the high school, the very area we're saying is going to be a focus for extended learning and opportunities in summer is also an area where we're going to need many of those teachers to be in professional development for the new curriculum. So I know I'm not saying anything that you don't already know, but that popped out at me very quickly when I looked at this.
And I appreciate you naming that. That is really important for all of us to just name and affirm and think about how do we approach any kind of training, if there's also a hope or an interest that that same teacher is going to be teaching for summer school. So I appreciate that flag, and it is something we need to be really mindful of. And perhaps, again, I think the thing that continues to serve us well is giving choices. So if we can offer different opportunities for when a training can be available so it matches with this teacher's schedule, I think those are the kinds of things we're going to have to be sensitive around. And I think our teachers need rest too. So we have to be really mindful of that. So thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Chinia.
That, and the way that we compensate our teachers to participate in this training during the summertime, I think is important for us to consider. It's not necessarily incentivizing this work, but it's respecting people's time during a period of time where you just said, Dr. Dabrowski, they should be resting and they're already taking vacations, but this is important work. To me, this looks like a very quick, this looks very fast to me, right? If the board approves this procurement, these procurement items, and all of the work that we've talked about happening between April and June, if we hold true to that, and then we start the learning and we're implementing this in the fall, that seems very fast paced. So for me, I would just need assurance in us being able to actually do that, because at the end of the day, in the fall, when we start school, we're in front of our young people and they're not going to get 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade back. They're not going to get those years back. So whatever we do, we've got to be prepared for them as best as we possibly can, knowing that we're going to hit some bumps in the road, right? We're trying something new and transitioning, but we also have to do things very clearly, concisely for the sake of our young people, because we do have to grow their capacity in addition to staff capacity. But certainly we want to see improvements in student achievement.
Have we floated this? Have you all floated this with school-based staff, this timeline?
We're meeting with, go ahead.
No, go
We're
ahead.
meeting with principals tomorrow morning at our academic stat. We're going to share these slides as well, share the timeline as well. And in the same way we're doing here, ask for questions, ask for feedback, ask for suggestions. And in some cases, volunteers where we know there's expertise, whether it's around learning, whether it's around organizing, so that again, across multiple offices and stakeholders, hands are on deck to make sure, to your point, Commissioner McFadden, that we're not only ready, but we're managing what we can do with quality. We don't want to get to a point where we're trying to be compliant and then get to September and the left foot is trying to do what the right foot's supposed to do. We want to make sure that roles are clear, teachers are clear on what we can manage, and we build a momentum from there. And so tomorrow is the next step in that process.
Appreciate that. And there sounds like there already is buy-in, right, with multiple stakeholders. So that's a great start. Another thing that comes to mind is during the summer, if possible, if we have the time, to perhaps, I don't know, this is an idea that just came to mind, right? Like piloting some of the lesson with some of our high school students throughout the summer, if there's time for that. I don't know if it is, but that's just a thought that came in my brain as we're thinking about summer learning and how that experience could potentially influence what happens throughout the course of the actual school year.
It's on a few whiteboards around here, the idea of how to bring that in. So we're thinking similarly, a lot of different questions to make that happen, but it's something we're hoping and considering, because that gives us a head start, right? So excellent suggestion as well.
I will make one other connection to that. We'll be coming to the board later this month about our school year calendar. And as part of that school year calendar, we have 10 professional days that we talk about. And so when we think about our high school English teachers, making the connection that this is a year-long, year-one experience. This is a multiple year. And in previous places where I've worked, I always tend to think of implementation as a 3-year. That's that phase one is the first 3 years of implementation. So that as we think about getting teachers up and ready, we're really thinking about just initial first steps with it. And that first bit of implementation is, again, exactly that, the first step. So there's a lot of support that we want to offer throughout the year. So there shouldn't be, and we'll certainly make sure to emphasize, this isn't we have to get them fully ready for it to be at 100% fidelity and ready to go on that. You know, it really is a phased approach of learning this curriculum. And knowing that there'll be support embedded throughout the year as part of our systemic PD.
I love that, like the intentionality around the actual calendar, right? And as we're implementing new ideas or recovery or whatever it is, that we're actually building the time to allow our plan to become reality. And I think in history, that hasn't always worked, right? It's just, oh, it's time for the calendar. Let's, I don't think everything has been strategic and aligned. So I think this is a good opportunity to ensure that that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that brings us to the close of this specific presentation. I appreciate the questions, appreciate the nudges. I can't say enough how exciting this is for us as staff here at Central and for some of our schools as well, who have been invested in a new curriculum for secondary students. I can tell you as someone who for most of my career has been a K-8 person, and certainly while I've been here at City Schools as a K-8 ILED, I shared spaces with secondary leaders, and this was a constant topic of discussion. For us to be at this point is like, it feels a little weird because I want them to be the ones that lift up the trophy when this happens, and I'm hoping to bring them around, but this is a big moment for us. We're very excited by it. And on the other side of the coin, that timeline, Commissioner McFadden, you said it, right? It's ambitious and it's challenging, but I believe in us. And I think this is the right time coming out of COVID to begin to organize with choice and agency and meet our teachers where they are. So we're going to do our best. The feedback is helping, and we'll continue to keep you abreast and we'll be transparent about where we are. We have momentum. We're hoping to continue to use it into the summer and into the fall. Chief Dabrowski, you want to add anything before we close? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. I think you all make a great team, and I know that we all look forward to hearing more about this. So this comes to us in this setting, correct, Chief Dabrowski, and then soon it will move to the board, the actual board letters for procurement for the board to vote on.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So just to make sure that my colleagues are aware that we're actually going to get procurement letters, board letters around these two different selections to vote on, the full board to vote on soon.
Yep, that's correct.
Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see that we have Miss Tanisha Moore with us. She is from our board office. In our board office, Tanisha, just could you remind us if we have anyone signed up today for public comment?
Hi, good evening, everyone. No, we do not have anyone signed up for public comment today.
Thank you, and we appreciate you being with us today, Tanisha. I like when you're in our meetings.
I like being here.
Good, we can keep you.
All right, that's a plan.
So we're ready for our procurement agenda. There are a few items on the agenda, and Commissioner Reed, I'm actually going to lean on you if you would like to go through item by item, or if we have specific questions, I'll lean on you for that. But we definitely have 8 items.
Questions would only involve 1202 and just a comment on 1901.
Okay, so Commissioner Cheney, Commissioner Griffin, are you all okay with going with specific questions for items, or do we need to run through all of them? I think we can just go through questions.
Questions are fine for me too.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I saw you. Go ahead, Commissioner Reed. Go ahead.
In 1202, I guess my only question is, considering the supply chain and the inability to hire staff, how can we engage people to do and fill the role of board certified behavior analysts? Can we get these people? And how complicated is it? Hi, Deborah, how are you?
I'm well. Good afternoon. So yes, there are board certified behavior analysts that are available through vendors. Matter of fact, I get emails all the time from our vendors to say there are additional staff in this area. This is an area that is a specialized staff to be able to provide additional support for students that are displaying certain behaviors at our schools. Especially, we're seeing more behaviors because of the pandemic. And it's not just for students with disabilities, but for our very young learners that had not experienced school. So we're seeing a lot of behaviors like for our first graders. And if you think about it, those students had never been in school. So they did not have a kindergarten experience in a school building, or they may have only had a few months of a pre-K experience in a school building. And so some of the behaviors that teachers are seeing in school buildings now, these experts in this field are able to work with teachers, work with families, work with the students to be able to provide strategies. But these staff are available, unlike some of the other staff where there are shortages.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my second part of that is the integration of these outside experts with embedded staff. How complicated can that be, or is it going to be a really easy, smooth process?
So we work very closely with the staff here within the Office of Special Education, first so that they understand our student population. We make sure that we pair the staff, we interview the staff, we pair the staff with the appropriate schools, so they will be regionalized. So we do currently have some behavior analysts that work with our schools. They work with our CCEIS schools, and those are schools where we have disproportionately been suspending students of color that are also receiving specially designed instruction. So although the vendors will send us resumes, we look over those resumes, look at who they've worked with in the past, to see if it's the right fit for our school district. Although they have this area of expertise, that may not be best for city schools. So we do vet this staff very well before we bring them on to work with our children.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Commissioner Reed, you also mentioned another item, 19. You had a question or thought about 19.
1901, it's just a thank you. And it's commendable what you guys are trying to do in terms of the school uniforms, raising more money, engaging more families, both from the homeless family level and also for the kids that go to the school that can't afford it, affordability level. So homelessness and affordability, I think it's really a great effort. I just appreciate it.
I agree. And my only thing with that, Dr. Fink, if you're on, would be how did we come to that particular number? Do we know that that's enough? Do we, like, how did we come to that particular number as an estimated amount for this particular item?
The estimated amount comes from the fact that we received a lot of that amount guaranteed to us in terms of grants. So if we need more, we will have to go out and find some more grants to be able to pay for it. And we do have some additional money, and if we need it, we will do it. But this looks like it'll be a satisfactory amount. The other part of the amount is the amount that comes from schools, and schools will put an amount in and they will use their school budgets for it. This is just an amount that is in there as an up to amount so that we can meet the requirements. One of the additional things that's especially important about the clothes for the homeless is that the parents can actually go with their kids and make sure they have something that fits, that's the right thing for them, and the kind of things that they need. So we have been very fortunate to have given some extra funding, which means that we don't give them a voucher once a year. We give them a voucher a second time a year, which is something that I've always wanted because kids do grow. And what fits them in September doesn't necessarily fit them in January. So our parents are getting 2 vouchers and they're getting clothing during the year, again, when they need it. And if we need more money, we will come back and ask.
Thank you, Dr. Fink. Any additional questions, Commissioner Reed?
No, thank you. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Commissioner Chinya, Commissioner Griffin. Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you.
So I just want to remind the board that I believe on our calendar, the next meeting that we actually have is a board meeting, a full board meeting on this next Tuesday. It'll be a week from today. And that public meeting begins at 5 p.m. The next meeting of this committee, the Teaching and Learning Committee, will be on April the 5th. And if I remember correctly, Commissioner Chinya, don't shoot me, but I remember correctly, the birthday, I think Tanisha has a birthday coming up in April. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. April 1st.
So that's coming up. So happy early birthday to you. But that meeting will be focusing on more of our R3 work around wholeness. And we'll also be looking at IHBJ public charter schools as a heads up to the team. I hope everyone has a great afternoon. The rest of your evening, we are looking at daylight savings now, so it is still bright. As I'm looking out of my office, it is still light outside. So please enjoy your evenings. Stay safe, and thank you all for the work that you're doing for our children and for Baltimore City. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Be well.
Okay. Were we supposed to stay with Ronald? Because that looks like.
That's what I thought.
Right. I just sent him a message. Because it looks like he left too. Oh, there he is. Okay.
I think we need the recording.
Let me see if I can stop it. I don't know how I left out of the meeting.